I'm Max Yela. I'm the head of special collections at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee Library. Remember, it's the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, not to be confused with Madison. So if you contact us in some ways, it's Milwaukee. We always get confused all the time with the two largest of the state system institutions. And we are in special collections. This is our reading room. We're a public institution, and this is important. We're a public institution, and which means that we're open to the public, right? So we certainly collect for our staff, our students, our faculty, but we also collect for the public. And the materials here are open and available to anybody who walks in the door. So that's an important thing to remember about our collections, and about probably any public special collections supported by taxpayer dollars. What we're looking at here is just some materials that we had a Shakespeare celebration on Friday, even though today, April 23rd, is officially Shakespeare's birthday. We had our celebration on Friday because we just thought it would be a fun Friday thing to do. And so we had some of our tomes out. For our celebration, we bring in a person who produces Shakespeare regularly to talk about certain aspects of Shakespeare. And this Friday was about aspects of mercy in Shakespeare. So some wonderful plays that we some wonderful shake scenes we produced, as well as a presentation about mercy in Shakespeare. So we brought out some of our works from the collection and opened them up to certain pages that related to aspects of mercy. And we have a wide range of materials in the Shakespeare collection, going from the second folio and the fourth folio right up to the present day. And the reason why we have this collection is not simply because we try to collect rare and significant works, is because back in the 18th century there was a project started by a number of people, but the most notable person being Samuel Johnson. The noted Samuel Johnson, of course, the polymath, the Renaissance man of his century, made an attempt to gather all editions of Shakespeare that were known to him and try to collate the various changes and differences that appear in all of these. And he called it a Variorum Shakespeare edition, in which he was able to collate and bring all together all the variants in one volume. So that's what a Variorum edition is. And that project continued on through the 18th century, then the 19th century. It had a little bit of a hiatus. In the 20th century, it was taken up by the Modern Language Association. And the Modern Language Association had scholars in one location with materials trying to collate things up through the 20th century. And it just so happened that from the 1970s right up to the late 1990s, I think maybe even to the early 21st century, I don't remember exactly when it ended because I can't remember, it was located here on this campus in this library. To support the MLA's new Variorum Shakespeare project, the library began to amass and accumulate and then preserve these early editions of Shakespeare. What we're looking at here are a variety of things, but the most important thing I think for our blogger is that we have Samuel Johnson's Variorum edition of Shakespeare's plays. We had a number of other things we had out for our celebration. Some of them are notable, some of them not so notable. There's this early 19th century coffee table book, right, of sorts, a massive piece. It's not the sort of thing that you read, but it is a limited edition, signed by the editor and by the collator, James Hallowell. It's the Hallowell edition, which includes a number of illustrations from 1856. I think perhaps my favorite, and it's just a lovely piece, is this 1867 Shakespeare that was edited by a woman, Mary Cowden Clark. And Mrs. Clark edited the work from a woman's perspective, published in New York, and it's significant because it's a a great edition, not particularly wonderful edition, but it's fully illustrated. And what's curious, if you keep going through the illustrations, one illustration after the next, you begin to note that there aren't any men.
Right.
It's only images of the female characters. You know.
Wow.
Of course, the Merry Wives of Windsor would have merry wives.
Yes, indeed.
Right? But let's, if we look at Macbeth, what are we going to find? Let's see. Find or Titus Andronicus. Look at that. Do we find Titus himself? No, but we find Lavinia.
Certainly.
We have to find Lavinia. Let's see.
That is so fascinating. It's all the women.
It's Tamara. Exactly.
Queen of the Goths.
Queen of the Goths, but Lavinia with her hand still intact.
Oh, yes.
Oh, what's this man? Could it be? Oh, no.
And who was that?
I don't know.
It looks like a pretty
It's Virgilia.
Oh, Virgilia. Well, I was right about the country anyways.
Yep. It's a play I don't know very well, unfortunately. They did a movie of this, didn't they?
Yeah, very recently. Virgilia is a very small character in Coriolanus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to try to find the right female characters, sometimes you have to dig real deep, depending on the play.
Yeah, that's
Right,
astounding.
So it's only the female characters. It's a wonderful image of Lady Macbeth. I just want to find Macbeth.
What do we have there?
We have Anne Boleyn. Yeah, Boleyn.
Anne Boleyn making a surprise attack here. Well, from Henry VIII, certainly.
That's right. Yeah, right. There we go. Oh, who's this? It's St. Joan.
Oh, yes. Absolutely, and a wonderful picture of her, too.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And these are steel plate engravings, which are very sharp.
Trust in God, but wear a helmet.
Yeah. Yeah, I shouldn't have to do that.
And is it typical for those little pieces of paper to be in between all of the...
Yeah, they are. What people don't realize is one reason when you come to a special collections, you will never be allowed to use a pen to take your notes in the special collections. Why? Because pen has ink, and ink is indelible, and ink is really caustic to organic material that books are made out of, like paper and wood and vellum and things like that, cloth. And it turns out that it's even bad for the book itself. Right? So you get these images made out of ink from a copperplate engraving, and over time it'll just bleed right through the page because ink is caustic, and it'll bleed to the next page, and it'll just keep going. And it'll bleed right through. And so this is a guard sheet to protect from off printing onto the next page. Actually, I think there should be a guard sheet here because in about 1,500 years, we're going to have this image over here because you can already see it's beginning to bleed through on this side.
Yeah.
This is how caustic pigments can be. It's a great image.
It is a beautiful image. That's so amazing. I wonder how many copies of this book there are.
And the more common print technology of this time, or any time in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, is copperplate. Right? Steel plate. Copperplate is very soft. And steel has a very hard edge to it. You can get a lot of fine details.
Beautiful.
I guess I'm not finding Lady Macbeth. I'm not going to try to spend all my time trying to find that for you either.
Well, it looks like there are a lot of heroines in that book.
Yeah, this is a heroine book.
She spared no expense.
No. What do we have here? We have some production copies of plays. So here's Shakespeare's Winter's Tale, but it's not just Shakespeare's Winter's Tale. It is Shakespeare's Winter's Tale as altered by J.P. Kemble and produced at the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane on a very particular date. Being sold for 1 shilling and 6pence.
Wow.
And here's Measure for Measure. I think this is also a great. This is a copperplate engraving. This one is also produced at Drury Lane.
Lucio.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, it's a comedy.
Ha ha ha. Measure for Measure. As you will. Okay.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Great. And then these variorums, I'm sure many of my readers aren't kind of instructed in this, but how are these constructed usually? Or these period ones? Is it all kind of footnoted at the end as an index?
It's actually footnoted as you go along. You can see here.
Right.
All right.
And it says all the differences between the texts, the extant texts or original texts, in what, the 17th century, or does it go on to the modern?
From the 17th century up to the time of this printing.
Oh,
And then we have also Dr. Johnson's commentaries on the various editions. We have, Dr. Warburton says that.
aha.
Da, 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 da.
So it's not just about the folios and the quartos; it's about all the editors since until this was published.
Essentially, yeah.
Right.
Right.
So the goal being, I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around it, not to necessarily find the most authentic version of it, but to track the editorializing of the copies as they evolve through time.
Right, yeah,
Wow.
exactly.
And these are what year? These variorums? Variora.
It's from the 1770s, and they travel over time.
So these
It was
books are
printed in 1773,
older than the United States of America.
just barely.
Yeah. Yeah, but still.
Interestingly,
Fabulous.
who's Johnson's famous biographer? Who's Johnson's famous biographer?
I don't know.
Oh, come on! You must know. Who's Johnson's famous biographer? You guys know this.
Someone
he doesn't
does.
know. But Boswell.
Oh, right. Yes.
Boswell too did Variorum Shakespeare's as well. So it's just kind of interesting that the biographer would follow suit and follow in the footsteps of the person that he did a biography of. Now, the folios aren't the very first printings necessarily of works by Shakespeare. Before that, there were
Individual plays, right? The
individual
quartos,
plays,
yeah.
The quartos, exactly. And they have, they weren't necessarily sanctioned or published by the players or by Shakespeare. Shakespeare never had anything, I don't think, published in his name necessarily. So you have some unusual things that happen in the folios, right? There are good folios that come very close to what we understand the text to be today, and other folios that are just bizarre. Hamlet is among my favorite. We have the bad quarto and
Which is really short, isn't it? There's one
it's
that's
very short, right? And it appears as if it was written by one of the people who, one of the players who had a particular role, and they remember their role really well.
Yes, of course.
So the famous "to be or not to be" line is not, to be or not to be. That is the question, whether to suffer the slings and arrows, da 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 da, right? And the bad quarto is "to be or not to be." There's the point.
Changes all of Western culture right there.
I've actually seen it performed that way, and it's actually not that bad.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I can imagine it might strike you as being fresh, which may be a great asset in that performance of
Absolutely.
that speech.
Absolutely. You can see a play over and over again, and of course, no two plays are the same for a variety of reasons. One, there's the director's take on how a play is produced from page to stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also the fact that, if you were to see all of Hamlet produced, you'd be in your chair for 5 hours, right? So very rarely do we see all of Hamlet produced on stage. So we have all kinds of cuts and emendations and splicings and so on. And most of our experience of Hamlet or any play is a particular production of it. So, if you see any of these plays, if you saw the play done in the bad quarto, it'd be very refreshing. I saw a production of Hamlet done in original pronunciation English.
Oh,
It
wow.
was just fabulous.
Where was that?
What's that?
Where was that?
It was here.
It was here.
Yeah, it wasn't the whole thing. I'm sorry. It was a portion of it that I saw.
And what did it
Scenes.
sound like to you?
It
To your
sounded
ear?
like a cross between Irish and Appalachian and pirate. and it sounded perfect. It sounded like it's exactly the way it should sound.
Wow.
You ever get that sense when you're watching a Shakespearean play? No matter how many times I watch a Shakespearean play, it takes me about 3 minutes to kind of like hear how the flow.
Yeah, I kind of call it logging onto the
Yeah,
language with your ear, just
Right,
to use a
exactly.
modern term. It does take a few minutes.
And then suddenly, boom, you're in it, right? And it's okay. But it still takes a while for you to get into that rhythm and that cadence and that the language and so on. Somehow, for me at least, in original pronunciation, which is only about maybe 75% sure that this is what it actually sounded like, you hear it almost instantaneously.
Wow.
Even though it sounds really foreign. I mean, there are words like war is war, right? And that's the way apparently it was pronounced, war.
That's how it's spelled.
Yeah, right. And be is not be, it's bay.
Huh.
Right? To bay or not to bay. That's the question. Whether it's nobler.
Wow.
So there's slings and arrows, not arrows, but arrows, and it all rhymes.
Surprise!
Shakespeare
Surprise!
actually rhyming all the way through. It's like all the jokes make sense, and all the rhyming makes sense. You know, so
I remember
to war. You know, that kind of pirate kind of sound. To
Yes, I remember that reason and raisin would sound the same, so
Yeah,
that
right.
Falstaff's "if reasons were as plentiful as blackberries" would actually make sense as a joke. If raisins
were
as plentiful as blackberries, I could give you raisin good enough. Why X, Y, and Z would be so.
precisely.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you so much,
You're very
Max.
welcome,
This is wonderful.
My pleasure.